Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here. So in today's video, we are going to see how we will do a similar effect like this one, like a thread sort of building a shirt or a cloth, building on a cloth, right? And this is basic Cinema 4D. It uses like 3 steps, right? Just Mograph and some traces and stuff. So if I actually, this is a picture viewer, right? And this whole thing was actually formed by these 3 steps. So the first step is like the t-shirt itself, building on, revealing, and then the edges have this sort of torus. I use torus though, but like make it thin so that it looks like some sort of thread at the edges of the shirt, right? And these lines, right, which comes on, and then together they all come together to form this looking as if like it's these lines are trying to form the shirt or building the shirt on. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will do this one. So I'm in Cinema 4D R26, but everything I'm going to talk should be able to work in almost every version of Cinema 4D. So the first thing we are going to create is the our material or our object revealing or building on. And in the original case, it was this t-shirt, right? So we are going to build this first part. But I'm going to use a plain object so that it will be fast and it will be easier to explain, right, in this tutorial. So I'll come in here and I'll create a plain object. But this same thing will actually work in every scene, or this same strategy will is how you do it in object with any object that you use. So I'll create a plane, change it to -z, right? And I don't like the work plane in my viewport, so I'll come to my filters and I'll click on check the work plane, right? And I'll now come to display and change it to garage shading so that we see our segments. Now I'll come into the plane attributes, increase the width segment to 100 and the height segment to 100 as well. We can press C on our keyboard to make it editable, or press this button here also to make it editable, right? Now the next thing is we are going to do is to right click on our plane, come to other tags, and I'll choose vertex map, and you can see it apply this red shade to our plane and this particular tag as well. Other way you can get the vertex map is to select one of these modes, polygon modes. Use the move tool to select either of them, right? And I'll come to select set vertex weight, and it will give you the same thing, right? So with the vertex map applied, we come in, select the vertex map, and come down here to its attributes, change it from use, make sure you check use fields, and now you can see we already has freeze applied in here. If you don't have freeze, you can simply come into this layers, and now you can choose freeze down here. All you have to do is click and hold it, and you reveal this so that you can choose the freeze. But we already have the freeze, so we are fine. Now the freeze is what we are going to use to grow our vertex map. So how do we want our vertex map to grow? So we have to create a spherical field, and that's if you click and hold this one, so you have all these fields. You can use either of them, but I will use the spherical field. I've already created, so let me undo a spherical field. And now with the spherical field, if I come back to the vertex map again, make sure it's always the blend mode is set to max. And now if I select the freeze, come down here, the mode, we change it from none to grow. So if I hit play, you can see our spherical field is growing. If I select the spherical field and move it, let's say to this point, and hit play, it will grow from that particular point, right? So that's why we are using the field. So I'll undo to bring it back in the center, right? Now let's adjust the growth. It's too fast, so I'll reduce the effect strength to something like 30, and maybe the radius to probably like 6. And if you have a smaller scene or smaller objects, it's very important that you make your radius also small, because it can actually sort of slow or not work properly. So depending on your scene, you have to check your radius as well. So now if we hit play, and now it takes a bit of time to grow, let's increase the number of frames. So I'll click on here and make it like maybe 250, you know, and now it kindly grows on nicely. So we like everything. So like I said, you are going to create this parts of our scene. So how do we make our plane reveal, we are going to use material. So I come into my material manager, create a new material, and I'll apply it to the plane. Right, let me first check, come to the display and check, bring it back to garage shading. Now I'll double click on the material to bring the material editor, and then in the alpha I'll make sure I'll check alpha. Right, come in the alpha, that you can see the texture. We have this small arrow here, click on it, come down to effects, and in the effects we have vertex map in here. Choose the vertex map, click on this white thumbnail and go into the vertex map, and now it will ask you which vertex map do you want to use to drive the alpha, and you can now click and drag this vertex map and drop it in here. And now you can see in our viewport it's affecting our plane already. If you click on the vertex map, you can see, so the yellow part is basically like white and the red part is black, or the yellow, you can also see the yellow part is like 1 and the red part is like 0, right? And the in betweens is like from 0 to 1. So if I hit render as well, you can see it's showing. So that's what we are basically using to drive the transparency of our object. So now if I hit play, you can see it grows, and if I click away, you can see we have everything working perfectly. So basically we've created the first part of our scene. Let me quickly show how you do apply the vertex map in Redshift. So I come into my object, create materials, Redshift materials. Now create a material, Redshift material. So with my Redshift material created, I'll double click on it to open the material editor or the node editor for Redshift materials, and then I'll just type in vertex, and you see it brings the vertex attribute. All right, so in the vertex attribute, the same thing we did in the Cinema 4D material, we would click in here the attribute name, we'll click and drag in vertex map, and now we want to use it to drive the opacity of the material, right, like we did in the alpha of Cinema 4D's material. So if I select the Redshift, this material node, and come down here to the overall, you can see the tabs overall, we have this opacity, and this is what we want to use the vertex map to drive. So I'll click on this point, put it on this blue point, and now it will reveal all the objects that we can connect to. And I'll come into the overall and I'll choose opacity color. All right, and now something is happening. Now if I go ahead and apply it, let me replace it with the Cinema 4D, the old material, and now you can see nothing has changed in the viewports. But if I come into the Redshift render view and bring the Redshift render view and hit render, you can see it's working in our Redshift as well. So if I select this, you can see the same thing is going on here, right? So for now, let's disable our Redshift render view and put it away. I'll bring back the Cinema 4D default material because that's what you can see in the viewport, right? Now, so we've created the parts which the object is revealing, and we are cool. Now let's create this part, which is the part where the tip of this of the cloth, or it has this sort of threads, small threads at the tip of the cloth. So let's create that part. So to create that small threads at the tip, everything is going to be based on the first vertex map that we created, right? So now we want the whole thing to be at the tip of this particular vertex map, right? So let's create a vertex map that will give us just the yellows at the tip of this particular vertex map. So how do we do that? I'll just right click on the plane again and come to other tags, and I'll add another vertex map, right? I'll actually change this vertex map name to, I'll add 2 to it so that we differentiate it. It's very important to name your vertex map, right? So I'll name this vertex map 2, right? I'll come down here and I'll make sure use field is checked, and now we will delete. We don't like the freeze in this particular vertex map, so I'll delete it. But what you want to use to drive the movement of this vertex map is the first one. So I'll click this first one and click and drag and drop it in here, right? and now you can see there as this vertex map has the same thing as the first one. You don't see the difference, but we don't want the whole yellow. We want it just at the tip. So what I'm going to do is, let me select the move to. I don't like the vertex map to select it. So I'll select the second vertex map, come down to the modify layers, and I'll choose curve. Right, I'll hold Control to click somewhere here in the middle to add another point, and now I'll click and drag this one down, and now I'll move the middle point upwards. Right, let me adjust the tangent a bit, and now you can see we have a vertex map just only at the tip of our first vertex map. So you can see this is the first and this is the second one. So if I go back and hit play, this one, the second one, is based on the first one's animation as well. So this is what we are going to use to drive the objects or the small threads at the tip of our object. Right, so I like everything about it, but I feel like it's very sharp ending off. Right, so I'll add another modifier layer. So I'll come here into the modifier layer and I'll add a decay on top of it. I'll probably, let me actually increase it a lot to see the difference. So if I hit play, you can see it smoothly fades off. Right, but I don't like it too much like that, so I'll reduce it to like 60, and if we hit play, you can see it fades off smoothly, but like it's quite fast. So we want it. This is what we are going to use to drive our threads at the tip. But how do we create the threads at the tip? And that one too, we are going to use a matrix object. So I come into my object, a Mograph object, and I'll choose matrix. You can also do the same thing from up here. And now in the matrix object, I'll change the mode from grid to object mode. Right, and now which object do we want to clone on? So I'll just select the plane, click and drag it in here, and I can see it's cloning on the surface of our plane. Let me select the matrix, come into its attributes, and down here you can see the count. Increase it to probably 50, or let me actually do it 40,000 for now. And because they are matrices, it's quite fast and everything, so we don't have to worry about it for now. So now nothing happens. It's cloning just on the surface of the plane, right? So we want to use plane effector to scale it up and down, right? So with the matrix selected, if I come into my effectors and I choose plane, you can also go into your effectors up here and choose the same thing, right? So if I choose plane, you can see it's moving it upwards, but I don't want the movement, so I'll uncheck position and I'll check scale rather, and I'll check uniform scale, and I'll put the scale to -1. Right, now it deletes or it hides the whole matrix. So what I want is that, like I said, where with the tip, this second vertex, where it's yellow, I want my matrix to show, and where it's red, I don't want it to show. Right, so I'm going to use this to control it. So I'll select the plane, come to its fields, and I'll say use this second vertex map to do that, to control our matrices, right? And you can see something is happening. So where it's yellow right now, it's actually hiding it, and now it's showing where it's red, but I want it the other way around. So all I have to do is to, in the modify layers in here as well, when you hold it, click and hold it, you have invert, so you can just select invert, and now to do the reverse. So now where it's yellow it shows, and where it's red it doesn't. So if I hit play, you can see this is going to be at the tip of our revealing object. So now let's go ahead, let me click away, and you can see this is how it looks. So we can add a little bit of randomness to it. So let me actually get close to it, select the matrix, come to our Mograph effectors, and I'll choose random. You can see it's moving it all over the place. We don't want to move it as much, so I'll come into the random parameters, and I'll make this one maybe 1, make it all over 1 by 1 by 1, some small movement. But what's important is the rotation. So I'll come to rotation, and I'll rotate it randomly on the B like 360, right? And even somewhere here like maybe 30. Right, so we have a little bit of randomness there, and now we are cool. But how do we what do we use to make the threads? So I'm going to actually use Redshift. So in the original one I use Redshift, so I'll show you how you do that with Redshift, but later at the end of the tutorial I'll show how you use Cinema 4D's default object to do it, because it can slow the scene, but then there's a way you can work around it to sort of reduce like the slowness of the viewport and scene and stuff like that. So with this matrix, everything is fine. So all I have to do, if I want to use any object, I have to right click on the matrix, come to render tags, and I'll add Redshift object, or Redshift tags. You can add the Redshift object to your material, and now you can see it's set to particles. Now in the mode is set to disable. You can change it to any of these points, spheres, quite everything. But there's another one which is custom objects. That means you can define any object that you want to use. So I'll choose custom objects, and now I'll create in the original one I use torus, but actually you can use anything that you think looks like thread for you, anything that you think will work properly. But I use torus in my original one, so I'll create this torus. I'll make the ring a bit, maybe the pipe radius, maybe 0.5, very small, and I'll make the ring maybe 6. All right, and now I'll actually change the orientation to maybe plus y x or something, and I'll now select the Redshift object tag, drag and drop the torus in there, and if I move, I'll first of all hide my torus. Like, you can actually move it somewhere way out of the scene, like somewhere that it wouldn't show at all in the scene, because you don't necessarily need it, but it needs to be visible so that it will show in your Redshift render. So you don't necessarily need it. So I've moved it somewhere I don't even know where it is. So now let me select my matrix, and now if I bring back my Redshift render view, right, if I come in here, you can see it's the toruses which are showing, right? It's still too probably big, so I'll make it even the pipe radius to 0.3. Yeah, and maybe like, because you'll be far away from it and the lighting and everything, it wouldn't be that obvious, right? And now we have this showing. If we bring the Redshift material on the plane itself as well, and see what's going on. So this is what's going to be at the tip of your object revealing, and later with textures it will look even better, right? So now we've created the tip, the threads at the tip as well, right? So the next is the threads or the lines that comes in to form, like, to make it look like it's the one forming the whole thing. So let's get to that particular point and see how we will do that as well. So with the line threads, we are going to use a matrix object as well. So let me first of all create a null object and group all of these objects for the tip. So I'll select all of these and drag it and make it a child of the null objects, right? And I'll call it actually thread tip, right? So this is the one for the tip, and for now we can even disable it. We don't necessarily want it to show, but for the sake of the viewport, I'll bring back the Cinema 4D material on this one so that we see what's going on. Let's go ahead and create the line thread. So with that too, I'll come in here, hide this one. I'll come in here and I'll create in the Mograph menu, and I'll choose the matrix. I'll change the mode from grid to object, and the object you definitely want to use is the plane. So I'll click and drag the plane in here, and now it's creating matrices on the surface of the plane. So we increase the number of matrices that we want. So I'll set it to probably, let's say 30,000. And with this one, you have to really check, because it can really be heavy very quickly. All right, and now you can see it's created all these matrices on the surface of our plane. Now with the lines, we want it to come from this side, right? Like from where our camera is, like coming straight towards from the camera view. So we are going to use the plane effector to make our matrices come in, then retrace that. So I'll select with matrix, come to my effectors, and I'll choose plane. You can see it's moving it upwards, right, on the Y, but I'll set it to 0, and I'll move it on the Z rather to, like, say maybe 1000. Yeah, way away from our camera, right? And now we want the effector, the plane effector, to bring it in, right, and then retrace the matrices as it's coming in. But we want to also use the same vertex map to do that. So I'll select the plane effector, come to its fields, and we'll drag and drop in the first vertex map right in here, and you can see what's happening. Right now, what's actually happening is the reverse as well. So now, instead of it bringing it in, it's actually pushing it out. Right, it's doing the reverse. Instead of bringing the matrices in one by one, it's actually filled it, and now it's pushing it away. So all we have to do is to do the same thing we did for the first one. Come into the layers in here, and you choose invert, and I can see it has actually flipped it. And now if you hit play, you can see it's bringing them back in, just like the way we want it. Right now, we don't necessarily want to see these particular matrices, so we can just simply hide them. What we want to do is we want to trace it. So I'll select the matrix, come to my Mograph menu again, and I'll choose tracer. And now, let me actually bring all of these down, the matrix and the tracer. So I'll call this matrix line. Right. In fact, I'll call the tracer to trace lines. Right, so you can see if I select the tracer and come to its attributes, the matrix lines has already been dropped in. If it's not, you can simply click and drag and drop it in as well. Now, if I hit play, this one will actually be a lot on the scene. So if I hit play, you can see it's bringing our splines in, right? But it's bringing them in and it's staying there forever. It's not leaving, right? That's why it's so dense. So how do we get the splines to leave? All we have to do is to come to the matrices, from limits to down here to the attribute. You can see the limits. You change it to from end. And now I set to none. We choose from end, and now it will ask us how long do we want our matrix to be in our scene, how many frames. So I'll set to, maybe for now, let's do 8 and see how it looks like. If I go back and hit play and see how it looks like, you see the last 8 frames and it disappears. So that's basically what you use to control the spline, right? If you feel like it's not enough, maybe you can actually make it 10, depending on how. And because it moves quite quickly, it's not obvious. You don't really see, like, it's like a tracer line coming in and disappearing. So it helps, right? So let me hit play, and now we have our lines coming in as well. So how do we render these particular lines? It's as simple. Again, all you have to do with the Redshift rendering, all you have to do is to simply right click on the tracer and come to your render task, add Redshift object to it, and now in the mode, change it. We can see now we have curve, right? In the mode, change it from disable to one of these, but I'll actually choose strip for now. And if we render, come to our Redshift render view, right, and I hit render. It takes a bit of time because that's a lot of geometry, right? It's calculating, so it took a couple of seconds, and now it will begin to show us our geometry. So now you can see our lines are showing in our Redshift render view, and like, even though we are using the default Cinema 4D material, so the alpha is not showing in here. So I'm going to actually add a dome light and some HDRI so that we can get to see the lines clearer. And I'll actually apply the Redshift material to this one, right? So let me first of all actually put the Redshift render view away, and I'll apply this material, and then I'll actually come in here, come into my Redshift light. In fact, come to Redshift light, and I'll add a dome light to it. I'll go into my HDRIs, and I'll probably, right, let's choose the grassy field. Choose OK. Right, and now in the I like this particular HDRI, like it's fine. We don't want to see it at the background though. And now if I hit render in my render view, it should show. So if I bring my Redshift render view, you can see now our lines are rendering and everything is working fine. So all we need to do is to add our materials and everything, the cloth materials that we want. But another issue is that if I get close to the lines, you can see they are thick, right? It's too thick. So you can select the Redshift tag in the lines and reduce it to how small you want it, right? So maybe 0.1 or something, anyhow you feel like you want it. So you can see I've set the lines thickness to 0.1, and it's quite okay for me at this point. So if now I zoom and see, like it's cool. So from here going, all you have to do is now apply your materials and how you want it to look. So let me actually go ahead and copy the old materials I used in the first rendering and show how it looks like. So I've actually brought in the two materials I used in the first example I showed, and this is the one for the cloth itself, the object itself, and this is the material editor node editor for it. And you can see nothing changed. It's the same vertex material I used and some other shaders and stuff. And all I have to do is to select the vertex in here. You can see I have vertex 1, but let me replace it in this case with this particular vertex map, right? And everything should work fine from here. This is the other material. If I double click on it to open the node editor for this material as well, you can see it's just the material, nothing special. This one, there's no alpha or anything plugged into it. It's just the material, same material itself, but the only difference is that the first one has the alpha plugged in, right? So let me close it. So I'll apply the fabric, this one, to the trace lines, and I'll apply it to the others. If I come into the thread tips, I'll apply it to the torus objects, right? I'll apply it to the torus objects, and now I'll enable the thread, and if I hit render, it should be fine. So I'll hit render. So you can see, like with those materials applied, everything is working fine and smoothly. Of course, obviously in the first one, the lighting is different. This I'm using just a general HDRI, so you don't get the shadows and stuff, but you still can get the idea of how the whole thing likes. And I've actually enabled the thread tips and everything, and you can see how it all comes together and it all looks like, right? So if you actually take time, if you hit play, let me actually disable the rendering for now. Unfortunately, I think because I'm rendering, I'm actually recording and trying to render, the Redshift is sort of slowing and stuff, so I don't know why. But then, like, I hope you get the idea. So if I hit play, right, you can see it's going on somewhere here, and now it smoothly gets to this point. Let's say let's actually let it go a little bit further, right? And one thing you have to notice that the splines, like the geometries that are being applied, is being calculated by the Redshift renderer, so it's quite heavy, so it takes a little bit of time to upload it into sort of RAM before it starts rendering. So that's another thing. So let's see everything. This is how the whole thing looks like, and now let me hit render once again. Hope it will be faster this time. And yeah, so this is like how it looks like with just this general lighting and everything. What you can actually do is to play with a little bit with the randomness of the tips, the ones at the tip and everything, or maybe actually add a little bit of delay to the spline tracer, the tracer. You can actually, the amount of delay from the end, you can actually increase it like 15 so that it delays a little bit in the scene. So that's basically how I actually did it with Redshift, and it's quite simple with basic Cinema 4D and Mograph techniques. But let's actually see how we will actually get for instance, the ones at the tip rendered in Cinema 4D and without it being too heavy on the scene, right? So let's actually see how we will get that one. So let me pause this one and go back to this particular scene. Also, it's very important for me to say that, like, when you are working with trace objects all the time, after you are done with the movement of the trace lines and everything, and you like it, it's always important for you to bake it or cache it. And I have a video here that shows how you can actually bake your tracer into simple splines so that it can be very predictable for you. All right, first of all, let me do one quick tip here. Is to render the tracer. It's actually easy for that one. It's very easy to render it with all you have to do is to, so in this case you're not dealing with Redshift again, right? So to render the tracer with basic default Cinema 4D physical or standard render, let me delete the Redshift object and the material. All you have to do is to come to your create material, materials, and you can create new hair material, and you apply it to your lines. And from here going, you hit render. It will take some time, but you can see it's rendering our hair materials, right? Let's delete the in fact, let's replace this texture with the Cinema 4D material we created, right? And now if you hit render, you can see the hair material is being rendered. So in there you can select your hair material and go ahead and play with it with the colors and stuff. So whatever color you want to use, let's say white. Okay, so this is our color. The thickness, can also play with it how you want it, maybe 0.2 something, and let's render. See, so you can play with the thickness and all of that. Another is what else? So now let's go ahead and see how we render the tip here, like the ones, this particular rings at the tip, how we render that, right? So for now, let's hide the tracer, and now let's also even disable this matrix. So how do we get this one render? So it's actually as simple. Ideally, we can simply, with this material, the ones at the tip, you can simply create a material clonal object and add something like a circle ring, or even the torus itself that we created earlier. But we can use it, but it will be very heavy on the scene, right? Because let me check, 40,000 matrices, and if you use clones, that will be very heavy to render, right? So let me apply this ring. I'll make it smaller, maybe like 5, right? And instead of just cloning it direct on the matrix, it will be very heavy. So a way around it is that we don't want to clone 40,000, so we want to use polygon selections, right? So that we clone on the polygon selections. So how do we do that? Let me go ahead and disable the matrix, and now on the polygons, let me also in fact delete this material for now. And now let's go back to this vertex map. So we want to use this vertex map to select polygons so that we clone on those particular polygons. So if I take this plane object, come to the polygon mode and select one of these polygons, right? All I can do is to come to select, and I'll say store selection, right? And you can see it has given us this polygon selection tag, right? I'll just come to fields, and I'll say use fields, and now I'll delete the freeze. And now I want the selection to be controlled by this particular vertex map, right? The vertex map to this one. So wherever it's yellow, it should select polygons for us. So if I hit play, it not be obvious. If I double click on it, you can see now it's selecting polygons, right? Even though you wouldn't see, but until you select it, that's when you see the polygons are being selected. So we want to clone on select polygons, and with clones you can simply easily clone on polygons. So I'll select the clones and I come to change the mode to object, and the object I want to clone on is the polygon selection. So I can simply drag and drop it in, and now the clones would clone on the polygon selection. So if I hit play, and let's increase the number of clones in here. A lot. Maybe let's put render instances to see, and let's increase it by 10,000. Right, you can see it clones these circles on there. So now let me change the axis. So I like this particular axis. We can go ahead and add the randomness and everything to it. So I come to the effectors, and I'll come to open the thread tips. I'll use the same random effector to affect it. So I'll choose the random effector to affect it to give it that randomness and all of that. And now if I go back and hit play and see our clones are working. You can even first of all like hide this plane as well. You don't want to see it. You just want to focus on this particular ones at the tip, right? And now if you hit, everything should be fine. Now how do we render? So we are going to use the same here because it's spline, and simply right click, and not actually right click, you can simply come in here and apply the hair material that we applied to this one. And let's see, I'm not really sure. Let's first hide the plane. It's not rendering, but I think it's because it's set to render instance. So let me change it to instances and see. And you can see here now it's set to instances. Now everything is rendering. So when you're about to set it to render, you probably have to change it from render instances to instances so that it will render. But then if you want it to move quicker in the scene, you have to probably put it in render instance so that or maybe let's see multi instances actually even work, and that will make it even more quicker to play in the scene. Right, let's make this one probably 40,000, and you see everything plays as smoothly as we want. But then when you're about to render, you have to make sure it's set to instances before you hit render. So this one is for you to get quick feedback in the viewport, and then when you're about to render, you set it to instances, and that one will be actually slow, but then you can render it. So that's how you actually, the way to get the tips, the ones at the tip, to work with this default Cinema 4D render, standard render or physical render without Redshift. I felt this was important. I tried it initially, but it was too heavy doing everything in the viewports. All right, so I decided to do this part. I hope this was useful, and if there's anything that you didn't understand or you have any question, you can actually send it or type it in the comment, or send me a personal DM, and I'll try to explain or see if I can do another video or something to explain it further. I hope you learned something from it. You get some tip which you can apply it in the projects of yours. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.